A recap of last week's episode.
I'm Patrick A. Kelly, and this is my journey chronicled by significant incidents in my life that made me who I am today. At age 3, I was molested by a family member multiple times, and then later by a friend of theirs. At age 6, I almost died and experienced my first supernatural and spiritual encounter, which has become a part of my being and has always stayed with me till this day. At age 8, and continuing on for the next 6 years, myself and my siblings were tortured. Myself and my siblings were tortured by my mother and stepdad. My sisters were molested at age 10. At age 10, my mother used to pit me and my sister, who are by the same mother and father, against our sisters, stepsisters. At age 15, I developed a sexual addiction that lasted until my mid to late 30s. At age 17, I was abandoned and felt alone, felt unloved. And with all the trauma I had experienced in my life, this experience, it seemed different. And yes, I felt unloved. At age 18, I experienced a mother's love from a stranger. At age 18, my then girlfriend, whom I had lost my virginity to, told me she cheated on me with a friend of mine. And as I sat on the bed, I began crying, and I felt like a part of me was disappearing. That day marked the final blow to my brokenness. And for 21 years, I was so many things. At age 38, I became celibate, and this was all by the deliverance that God gave me from my sexual addiction. At age 39, I became extremely sick. I got evicted from my apartment and lost everything I had because of vanity and pride. At age 40, God showed me through my loss and sickness the strength of my body and His continued love. At age 41, I felt like the modern day Job because I gotten sick. I got down to 115 pounds. And I didn't have any strength in my body. It got so bad. I asked God, I said, Lord, I'm ready to go. God was like, it's not your time. It's not your time. I lost everything I had. It was one of the worst moments of my life. But He renewed my body. When I came through that, I felt like a brand new person. And He gave me back everything I had lost, and then some. I lost my voice for a year and a half. I couldn't speak. At 51, God revealed to me my true purpose. And ever since I was a kid, I always knew that there was something special for me to do. I just didn't know what it was. And at 51, after all the running and all the stuff that I had gone through, God finally revealed it to me. At age 51, I overcame the power of lust and had a transcendental experience, an out-of-body experience. At age 51, I stopped running from God and have embraced fully my destiny to the calling to be the message. I just want to say that in order for me to be the message, in order for me to do this podcast and to do the show, I had to lay myself bare as I'm doing now. So you can understand that this isn't a game at all. God is using me. He's using me to be the message for you. And He says, come as you are and be delivered. But in order for you to do that, you have to bear yourself to Him and everyone. Because of our strength, God don't give us more than we can bear. And if He put you through something, like what I've gone through or what you have gone through or what you're going through, mean that you're strong enough to handle it. And He didn't give you that. He didn't give you that blessing for you to hold on to it. He gave it to you so you can share it with other people so that they too can be blessed, can be delivered, and know the love of God. So I thank you so much for being here with me right now, because you've had so many other things that you could be doing. Thank you for starting this journey with me. And thank you for your support. And I can't wait to meet each and every one of you, to hear your story, for my continued deliverance and for the deliverance of others. Welcome to Journey 365. I'm your host, Patrick A. Kelly. Now, before we get started, please join me in an open prayer. Lord, we thank you so much for blessing us to be here tonight with all these beautiful and wonderful people. We thank you so much for having them to tune in, and we hope that they are forever changed and forever blessed and receive deliverance through you, dear Father. Lord, I personally want to thank you so much for allowing me to be here right now, for charging me to do this podcast, dear Father, and for giving me the strength and the courage to be able to tell my story, my life, tell my journey, dear Father. Amen. Regardless of what people may think, what people may say, all I know is that it's given me strength, and I feel like I'm going through a cleansing. And just to recap from episode 1, to be 100% honest with you, I can't tell you how many times I was like, you know what, I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. But God was there with me every step of the way. He said, if you are going to embark on this journey, you have to bear yourself. You have to bear your soul to everybody if you're asking them to do the same. So I did it. You know, it was very emotional for me. A lot of those memories, you know, were from way back, and they were very strong memories. Some of them were traumatizing, but I thank God that he blessed me and gave me the opportunity to do this. And I hope that by you listening and continuing to listen to this podcast, that you are forever changed for the better, that you are blessed, that you receive deliverance, and that you also help others to receive deliverance as well. Thank you. Thank you for this. Now, before I take you into episode 2, I'd just like to give you just a little backstory on this episode, and the reason why I titled it A Tainted Lil Soul. Now, remember at the recap, the beginning of the show, we recapped, and the first thing that I said in my chronicle was that I was molested when I was 3 years old. So this episode 2, A Tainted Lil Soul, is about that molestation, that time that I'm basically taking you guys back to when I was 3 going on 4, when I was molested all the way up till I was almost 7 years old. So without further ado, here is A Tainted Lil Soul. I'm Patrick A. Kelly, and this is my journey chronicled by significant incidents in my life that made me who I am today. Some would assume a child at 3 years old may not remember who they were once 4 or so decades have passed. But when something so subtle and understanding bores their soul, it transcends time. A memory so powerful that it is never forgotten. it never leaves you no matter how hard you try to forget how little understanding you have of its effect. This memory transforms you into things you don't understand and does it intentionally without regard to you, your control, or anything else that should be a stopgap, a firewall, a protection to tender souls who require security and safety at all costs, at every effort. See, this thing had transformed me, molded me into an incomprehensible something. The transformation was out of my control, and I had no say. Changed forever, tainted, impure, and used goods was how I felt. I remember being 3 years old and running around my grandparents' yard, playing with chickens and my little kid goat, eating the food my grandmother used to prepare. I loved her food so much that one day, being the greedy kid I was, and always, wanting to be attached to my grandmother's hip, I fell into a pot of boiling food. I do not have a scar to show, and only God and my grandmother, God rest her soul, know why I don't have a scar. I almost became the food that day. It was fun. It was fun living in the country. In Portland, Jamaica was magnificent in the early 70s. And the location of my grandparents' house place is close to the beach. The mountains were just a stone throw away. Or at least that is what I would like to imagine, with my little legs and all. And fruit and almond trees were easily accessible. Every day was a treat, as I could walk or run to a mango tree or grab a soursop or a banana because they were all on our land. I spent much time with my grandmother, my sister Donna when she would come from town, Kingston, and one of my favorite aunts, Dee. Dee was very kind to me, and she watched me as a child a lot, especially when my grandmother would go to town or had some work to do. I remember vaguely the first time it happened. I was 3 going on 4. And when school was out, I spent much time at home playing with my Tonka truck and the neighborhood kids from Mrs. Warner's and my girlfriend Darlene, a person with albinism who lived down the way high up in the hill. I don't remember why it happened or what I did to cause it to happen, but one day my aunt was watching me and she called me into the house while I was playing with my friends outside. When I came inside, she was lying on the bed in her underwear. She said, "Papa, come here." Papa is what they used to call me. When I came to her, she removed her underwear and took my little hands and placed it down there. I vaguely remember our conversation, and maybe it was a primer or a demand, but I remember touching her down there. When I did, I remember looking down there and it was dark because my aunt was dark skinned. And I began thinking how funny it looked, but I didn't have a name for it. As she kept asking me to touch her down there on different occasions, I began thinking how ugly this thing was. And it felt funny. I didn't know why I was touching her down there, but it felt like I was playing with one of my toys at first. As I got older, around 6, I became bored doing that, touching her down there, and I began resisting, and she would force me to touch her. She asked me to touch her down there one day, and I said no. Vaguely, she was saying things to me. I can't recall what she was saying, however. It felt like a defense to why she needed me to do it, to touch her down there. just before coming to the States, I was almost, I think about 7 years old. And my uncle and one of my girlfriends, a little person, were at home. I think my uncle was watching me because he was older, in his mid to late teens. And I found myself messing around with my girlfriend, touching her the same way my aunt would ask me to touch her. At that age, I still didn't know what that meant. Still, I felt something was changing inside me as I did it. That day marked the beginning of my exploration, and I thought I was transforming into something I didn't know. I remember playing alone in my grandparents' yard as the summer continued. My auntie was watching me that day, but left me alone. She left me alone to go up the street. After she left, I had a visitor. A young lady who said that she knew my Aunt Dee came by the house and coerced me to go with her by telling me how she knew my aunt. I don't recall what she said, but it made me feel safe. So I went with her. And she took me down the gully on my grandparents' land, told me to lay down on the ground, and got on top of me and began saying things. As she moved around, all I could think of was how she felt so heavy on top of me, feeling her warm breath on me, and that a stone had started digging into my back. When she finished, she got up top of me, and I got up from the ground with just my little shorts on. I was naked from the waist up, and my clothes were all dirty. When she left, I went back to playing with my toys. And I didn't tell anyone what had happened to me that day, but it confused me further. I didn't understand why these things were happening to me. But I was changing, and I didn't know why. Later that summer, I came to the States, and I never saw my aunt again or talked with her about what she did to me. It was a confusing time. It was a confusing time for me, and being in the States wasn't different. I later developed a sexual habit that became even more massive than I was intelligent enough to comprehend. I started becoming confused about who and what I was. I'm not privy to all that God knows or even know his understanding as to the order of the travails of my life. But what happened to me as a child, a toddler, had a profound effect on my entire life. And might not I have been molested by one of my favorite aunts and her friend, would I be the same Patrick A. Kelly, the one that God wants to use to bring others to him? Would my lack of experience or incidents that molded me to be here right now have been enough to tell this story? Would my life be evident and provocatively sufficient to compel the soul and touch others who have experienced similar experiences and incidents to become storytellers and receive strength in their deliverance? What happened to me is nothing new. I'm quite sure there are many of you out there who something similar may have happened to you, or maybe something even worse. And because it frightens you, you're afraid of it, or you don't want to deal with it, you bury it far in the back of your mind. I just want to let you know that it's okay. It's okay to confront your past, and it's okay to confront those things that have caused damage to you. Tell your story. Tell your story like I'm telling my story, and become delivered. Tell your story and become delivered through God. This is Patrick A. Kelly for Journey 365. I want to thank you all so much for joining me this evening, because you could be doing so many other things. Thank you for being on this journey with me for season 1. Come back next week for episode 3, where we'll be talking about my supernatural experience and how I almost died. Have a good night.
Patrick A. Kelly owns a copyright in and to all content in and transcripts of At Journey 365 podcast, with all rights reserved, as well as his right to publicity. You are welcome to share the transcript up to a maximum of 400 words in media articles such as the AJC and other notable media platforms, on your personal website, in a non-commercial article or blog post, and or on a personal social media account for non-commercial purposes, provided that you include attribution to At Journey 365 podcast and link back to the At Journey 365 podcast URLs. Media outlets with advertising models are permitted to use excerpts from the transcript per the above. No one is authorized to copy any portion of the podcast content or use Patrick A. Kelly's name, image, or likeness for any commercial purpose or use, including without limitation inclusion in any books, ebooks, book summaries or synopsis, streaming media, TV, film, or on a commercial website or social media site such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, X, etc., that offers or promotes you or another products or services. For the sake of clarity, media outlets are permitted to use photos of Patrick A. Kelly from the At Journey 365 podcast or licensed photos of Patrick A. Kelly from commercial image platforms. Content shared from tim.blog.